Dear students, BA Part 1, English Honours. I am a professor of English RDN DJ Mungel. Today I am going to brief you metaphysical poetry. You would be very inquisitive about the definition of metaphysical poetry. You would be facing a question as to what metaphysical poetry is. Anyway, first of all, I would like to explain the term metaphysical poetry. The term metaphysical came into existence after the demise, the death of the metaphysicals. Particularly, Samuel Johnson first described the term metaphysical poetry. And then it was John Dryden who used this term widely. He stated that John Donne affected metaphysics. Now, you must know that metaphysical poetry developed at the hands of a good number of poets, particularly in the early 17th century. However, it was first John Donne coming in the second half decade of the 16th century, who made a great contribution to the development of metaphysical poetry. Most of the metaphysical poets appeared upon the poetic scene, particularly in the early 17th century. Yes, what is metaphysical poetry? What are the common features of metaphysical poetry? You have to learn all these things. Metaphysical poetry, as I have told you already, that bloomed, developed, particularly at the hands of a good number of poets in the early 17th century. Poets like John Donne, Andrew Marvell, Abraham Cole, Henry Vaughan, George Herbert, and so on, so forth. Since I have to teach you metaphysical poetry with reference to a few metaphysical poets, particularly John Donne and Andrew Marvell, so I would like to go in detail about The main features of these two great metaphysical poets, John Donne and Marvell particularly. These two great poets of the group gave some common features to metaphysical poetry. Argumentativeness, reasoning, metaphysical conceit, learned imagery, abstract theme, manly and abusive language, the union of thought and emotion, the heart and the mind, concision, concentration, and dramatic quality happen to be the common features of metaphysical poetry at the hands of both the poets. And it is necessary for all of you to be fully acquainted with such and such features of metaphysical poetry. Because some of the metaphysical poets, other than John Donne and Andrew Marvell, also show some of the common features of metaphysical poetry as we find in the case of John Donne and Andrew Marvell. Anyway, metaphysical poetry is considered as a mini drama. It is really a short drama having the qualities of a drama, particularly the presentation of a theater, dialogues, the presence of the audience, and the speakers, and a certain idea. All the things are to be found in metaphysical poetry. If you study some of John Donne's poems, you will come across this dramatic quality of metaphysical poetry. Yes, the poet speaks to the beloved in such a way as indicates the fact that he plays the role of a speaker, an actor, and the beloved or the lady to whom he talks play the role of an audience. Further, language is dramatic, conversational, talkative, and it seems that the poet makes some dialogues upon the stage. Just as in a play we have a stage, likewise we also find a stage in metaphysical poetry. After all, the poet talks to the beloved or to a lady at a certain place, and the audience seems to be his own beloved or the readers. Next, metaphysical poetry is highly, we may say, reasoning, highly argumentative. The poet presents an idea and to consolidate it, he has to consciously, very minutely, weigh it on the balance of argument. Hardly any idea goes without reasoning, goes without argument. And therefore, argumentativeness happens to be the spirit of metaphysical poetry. Next important feature of metaphysical poetry is metaphysical conceit. Metaphysical conceit is a very important term here, and you also know its meaning. Conceit means comparison, likeness between two dissimilar things. It is extended, long, but it is a very peculiar, a very striking comparison. I mean to say, the comparison is ingenuine. The comparison between two dissimilar things is very striking. It is very witty. If you study a particular poem by John Donne entitled A Valediction Forbidding Morning, you will come to know that conceit is highly striking. The poet compares the two lovers to the two legs of a compass. So the comparison between the two lovers and the two legs of a compass is very witty, striking, and it goes beyond what we call the metaphysical world. So, metaphysical conceit, often used in metaphysical poetry, is very witty, striking, and ingenuine. It makes a fun of the lovers also. It strikes the readers also. But what is more important in this context is, I think, the reasoning, the argumentativeness of the conceit, particularly to carry on the argument, to carry on the discussion. The poet uses a metaphysical conceit. As for example, valediction, forbidding mourning, shows this, I think, a spirit. The poet wants to convince the beloved that she is not separable. Even though she is away from the lover, she is with him. Just as the two legs of a compass, even though stretched out, are joined with each other. Likewise, two lovers are always near each other, are always joined together. They are inseparable. So, for making this judgment, this argument, the poet takes resort to the use of metaphysical conceit. Next, metaphysical poetry is highly precise. It is rarely very long. Most of the metaphysical poems happen to be short, maximally 3 or 4 pages are contained in a long metaphysical poem. It cannot be an epic. So, in size, it is short, it is concise, it is brief, and this is its beauty. If you study metaphysical poems composed by different metaphysical poets, you will come across such a feature of metaphysical poetry. Otherwise not. So concision is a pearl, is a beauty, is a gem of metaphysical poetry. Whatever is said, said in short, and unnecessary stanzas or lines are not incorporated or included in this type of poem. The poet uses words, dictions, phrases, and some other important structural elements of poetry very consciously. He has to balance every word, weigh every word before he puts it to use. And at the same time, if even a single word is removed from the poem, then the whole meaning of the poem is disturbed. So metaphysical poetry is concise, short, and it is saved from unnecessary words, lines, stanzas, and so on and so forth. Next important thing or feature about metaphysical poetry is the yoking of idea and emotion, heart and the mind, and so on and so forth. The romantics express emotions in their poetry. They don't express the mind, the reason. The classicists are highly reasoning, highly argumentative, highly factual, and therefore in their poetry there is no place for emotion. But in metaphysical poetry we have a blend, we have a mixture of idea and emotion, and it is for this beauty of metaphysical poetry that T.S. Eliot calls it a very successful poem or kind of poetry. T.S. Eliot praises it, commends it. Anyway, metaphysical poetry combines both the classical and the romantic. So, from this point of view, metaphysical poetry is memorable, important, and significant. Next, in metaphysical poetry, we have a variety of themes, particularly abstract themes, metaphysical themes, Metaphysical, meta means above, meta means beyond physical. So metaphysical means what is beyond physical, what is non-physical. So its theme is bound to be non-physical, abstract, and so on. Love, death, God, etc. are the subject matters or the mere themes of metaphysical poetry. So far as the theme of love is concerned, with respect to metaphysical poetry, we must point out a certain fact. The certain fact that here love is different from the love mentioned in the Elizabethan love poetry. Particularly in major love sonnets composed by Elizabethan sonneteers, love happens to be one-sided. I mean, the lover is a prey to the cruelty of the beloved. He prays to the beloved like a goddess. He often falls at the feet of his beloved. He persuades her. He often asks her to accept his love. But it's rare. The beloved don't easily accept his love. So the lover has to suffer a lot at the hands of the coy and cold mistress. But there is no such thing in the case of metaphysical love poems. Particularly John Donne, in many of his love poems, particularly The Good Morrow, A Benediction for Wedding Morning, The Anniversary, The Ecstasy, and so on and so forth. We have ideal love. We have the type of love as is real, as is heavenly. In metaphysical poetry, particularly love poetry, John Donne places the idea of love in a very significant way. According to him, love always keeps two lovers near each other. It binds the two lovers. It doesn't allow them to separate from each other. So, love in metaphysical poetry is ideal, and it includes not only the body but also the heart. In other words, it may be said that the heart and the mind, the body and the soul are all unified, are all united. And particularly in John Donne's love poems, we have such and such things. Whether you study the good morrow, or the anniversary, or the ecstasy, or a benediction, forbidding morning, you will find the real nature of love everywhere. Anyway, John Donne is not an ordinary lover. He has been a saint. So, his concept of love is divine. John Donne gives a new idea of love, a new spirit of love, the love divine, the love ideal, the love both the physical and the spiritual. He didn't neglect the significance of the body in love. He considers the body as a medium of ideal love. So, John Donne and Marvel and some other metaphysical poets make a sharp reaction to the idea of love presented by the Elizabethan love sonneteers. John Donne views love with a separate angle. He thinks that love, ideal love, is to be enjoyed by two lovers only in complete silence, and for the realization of this type of love, it's necessary that both the lovers must be away from the din of modern life. They mustn't live in a town in a tall building. They mustn't be money minded. They mustn't be materialistic. People running after money and matter, people who are highly materialistic, can never gain this type of love. So, most of the Elizabethan sonneters, particularly Philip Sidney, Thomas Watt, the Earl of Surrey, Spencer, and so on and so forth, who were courtiers, lords, had no sense of real love. Even if they had an idea of love, they couldn't enjoy it, they couldn't obtain it. So, regarding love, I think metaphysical love is very much different from the physical love. Yes, next important aspect of metaphysical poetry is it's mainly abusive and hard language. Language is not very soft, it is very bitter, impolite, unruly. If you study John Donne's The Sunrising, the very beginning lines of this poem will indicate the nature of language. Old, fool, unruly son, such and such phrases and words have been used in the language. John Donne decried the sun, demoralizes the sun. The sun which are worshipped as God in many of the countries in the world. So, from these points of view, metaphysical poetry stands a very different type of poetry in the history of English literature, and it has its own place, own significance, and it is so much, so widely praised by some critics that we still remember it. Thanks.